You are listening to WCAT Radio, your station for quality Catholic programming. Your selected program will begin right after a word from our sponsor, GroupM7.com, a web design and hosting company. Log on to GroupM7.com today and let them know that WCAT Radio sent you.
You know, my finest childhood memories was the Saturday morning movies for about 4 bits each. My brother and I could split a Coke and a big box of popcorn and watch movies about Tarzan, Jane, and their Amazon River adventures. Well, maybe that's where Jeff Bezos took his name. His Amazon.com is now the largest online retailer in the world. I'm Michael Malfood with Group M7, the oldest and largest website design firm in East Texas. And here's my point, and as usual, it's a good one. If your website is modern and up-to-date, mobile and search engine friendly, it matters not whether you sell a product or provide information about your goods and services, your sales justifiably will increase just like theirs. The world uses the internet. We can improve your website and your email. Look at our giant portfolio at GroupM7.com. Since 1995, there's only one web and there's only one group, and it's us. It's Group M7.
You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final session of the student workshop for advanced research skills for graduate students. We have Professor Bill Badke with us today, and I'll introduce him a little bit more right after our prayer. So, Brother James, would you lead us in prayer?
Certainly. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Creator of all things, true source of light and wisdom, lofty origin of all being, graciously let a ray of your brilliance penetrate into the darkness of my understanding, and take me from the double darkness in which I have been born, an obscurity of both sin and ignorance. Give me a sharp sense of understanding, a retentive memory, and the ability to grasp things correctly and fundamentally. Grant me the talent of being exact in my explanations and the ability to express myself with thoroughness and charm. Point out the beginning, direct the progress, and help in completion. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much, Brother James. So, as we move into our final session, I'll provide one more introduction. Professor William Badke is Associate Librarian for Associated Canadian Theological Schools and Information Literacy at Trinity Western University in Langley, British Columbia, Canada. He has taught research processes to thousands of students for more than 35 years. His extensive publications show that he does research rather than just teach it. For those of you interested in reviewing his books, one is called Research Strategies, and the other is called Teaching Research Processes. With that, I give you Professor Badke.
Okay. Happy to be with you once again. And it's hard to believe this is the fourth session already. I thought today probably the best thing to do is to move towards further along towards the end of the process of developing a research project, which is organizing yourself, and then a little bit about research writing. I've done quite a lot of academic writing, everything from sort of opinion columns in a magazine that I do regularly for information professionals, up to quite scholarly kinds of writings. And I've learned some things along the way just about the whole writing process. And I think a lot of students struggle with that. You know, I've got my stuff together, but now how do I write this up? How do I make sense of what I'm doing? And so I'll have a few tips for you in that regard as well. But I want to start, first of all, with sharing my screen. And let me just get there. And here we are. Okay, and I'm just going to minimize this on the side. All right, this is the fourth module, and I've entitled it Organizing and Writing. And the point is that once you've gathered together resources and you've done your searches in databases, you've got lists of books and articles, you've got to make sense of it. You've got to organize it and get it into the right kind of shape so that you can actually do some writing that's going to be effective. Little bit about formatting. I know everybody hates formatting. You know, you got to have it in the proper format. Here's an example right here of a Turabian format. You with Holy Apostles have a separate slightly modified format, but you've got to follow it. And I am not really a believer in having students start from scratch and write up their entire citations, just slavishly following the style guide or whatever. When we do have tools within EBSCO ebook collection or ATLA religion database, we've got a cite function. Once you get results on a page, a result page of results of your search, you can click on any one title and up will come this material on the right, and you click on the cite button and it will give you citation formats, a number of them, and you can choose the one that's closest to what you need and copy and paste it and work with that. If you need to modify it a little bit, you can do so. But really do pay attention to citations. I know that there are some professors who don't care much about citations, but I would say the majority of them do. And some of the reasoning for that, first of all, just to be able to read a citation adequately, to be able to see where the title is and where the other information is very difficult if the style itself is muddled. If there's a lot of noise in there, a lot of stuff that you just have to kind of wade through to be able to read it easily. A second thing, though, is that citations often, when they're not formatted properly, will leave out crucial information like the date or the publisher or the name of the journal or something like that. And that's a real problem for a professor who's trying to figure out whether this thing is worthy of being in your bibliography when the professor really can't identify it very well. And so the professor's going off to Google Scholar with the article title to see if he can find or she can find just what this is and where it came from. And that, of course, creates a negativity in the evaluation of your work that you probably don't want to create. And so really do take citations seriously. I won't say any more about that, but I think it is important to get all your ducks in a row and really make sure that you've got everything sort of placed as it should be. Now, evaluation of found resources. You've got together a bunch of articles and books, and you're trying to evaluate them. How worthy are they to belong in this research project? It seems to me there are two basic criteria that you need to look at. One is the whole question of quality. If you're writing an academic paper, then you need academic sources or scholarly sources. And you should be able to determine that in part through the database you use, because you can often limit to scholarly sources. You can also, if you're wondering about a particular source, go to the actual journal homepage and see if it's peer reviewed, if it's has been gone through that process of quality checking before it's been published, and you can do that. You can have a look at a number of criteria. There's a really interesting website. I won't spend time going through it today, but it's called Virtual Salt or Evaluated, and was produced by a Christian English professor in the southern states. And it's really a great evaluation tool. He started it as a means of evaluating internet sites, but it's really a way of evaluating any kind of information. And he's got a checklist within there that he calls CARS, C-A-R-S. And you can have a look at his chart, and he's got all kinds of criteria there for determining whether something is of worthy quality to belong. You can check the qualifications of authors. Who's the author? Look up the author, Google the author, find out what degrees the author has, what sort of a track record the author has for academic publishing. And that may give you some guidance, unless it's a fairly new author and there isn't a track record. but you can generally find out the qualifications of authors. So I would do a little bit of scrutiny for anything you have questions about. Do a little bit of digging and see if you can determine just how high quality this is. Now, you can have tremendous quality, but if you don't have the second criterion, you're doomed. And the second criterion is relevance. It has to relate to your research question. And let me say a couple of things. First of all, anything that doesn't actually deal with an aspect of your research question should be tossed out. It doesn't belong. It really has to address something related to your research question. The other is, how central is the material that you're finding to your research question? I see a lot of bibliographies where everything is kind of peripheral. It's sort of roughly about the broader subject area, but not directly about the problem you're addressing. It seems to deal with little small aspects of the problem rather than sort of focusing on the problem itself. And so you end up with stuff that has little bits and pieces that might be helpful or not, but direct relevance, direct central relevance to whatever you're dealing with isn't there. And you've got to be looking for that as you're looking through your list of materials. How well does this material actually address my question? Do I have enough coverage in the literature to actually make sense of what I'm doing? And if you don't have enough stuff, you may have to go out and get some more. You may have to chuck a few things that aren't central enough to what you're dealing with. But you want your bibliography to be as focused as possible on dealing not just with the general subject area, but with the actual problem that you're dealing with, problem that you're addressing. And so that's something that's very important. So quality and relevance are the two criteria that you need to run your bibliography through the filter of. Filter it by way of quality, by way of relevance, and then you can have a fairly good idea that material that you're using is going to be useful, is going to be helpful. Okay, now I suggested you should do a preliminary outline right at the beginning of the process. Once you've developed your research question, develop this preliminary outline, and now that you're at the point of evaluating the resources and starting to think about writing, you're going to have to revisit that outline. It may be that you have to revise it. Now that you know a little bit more, you've gathered some resources, you realize that some of the things in your outline are just not going to work the way they're supposed to, or they need to be in a new order, or whatever. And it's really difficult to teach people how to outline a project. A few things that are general principles. In general, you provide information early in your project and analysis later. So in the earlier part, you're bringing the reader up to speed with the nature of the topic, the nature of the problem that you're dealing with. You may have a literature review, which is a summary of what other people have said about this particular issue. All of that is kind of background information. And then analysis follows that, so that you don't sort of start off with stating all your views, but you do that a little later in the process. And first of all, it's providing information to the reader. Often you're finding that you're comparing and contrasting ideas. And I've got some suggestions here for how to do that. Two different ways of comparing and contrasting opposing views or varying views. So let me just open this up to full screen and we'll take a look at this. Just wait for my escape thing to go. One of these ways is what's called the longitudinal outline, which means you discuss everything about one viewpoint before going to the other. So you've got scholars with two opposing views. You look at scholar A and analyze everything that scholar A has to say about this issue, and then go to scholar B and do everything that the scholar B has to do with this issue. So I've got a research question with regard to the date of the Exodus. Should we prefer the early date or the late date? There are two proposed dates for the Exodus. They are separated by too much time to both be true. So one of them is right and one of them is wrong in the ultimate scheme of things. And scholars have been debating for quite some time which date works best. So that's the views, view A and view B. One is early date and one's late date. And so there we go. I'm going to start with the late date, and I'll explain why in a minute. But present an introduction. That's where you'll give the background as to why there are these two dates proposed, and maybe some major proponents of each of the views. And then start with one of the views. In this case, I'm going to start with the late date. And I'm going to explain everything about the argument related to the late date. So we've got three lines of evidence. We've got archaeological evidence. We got evidence from non-biblical historical documents. So there are documents that aren't just rocks and stones and pottery, but actual writings. And then we've got biblical evidence, of course. And so I go through that, showing why people who hold to the late date, how they put the evidence together to support that late date. At this point, I'm not going to be terribly analytical. I'm not going to really reveal to the reader whether I like this or don't like this. I just want to lay it out, because earlier parts of a project tend to lay everything out without making a lot of commentary. And then I'm going to move to the early date. And once again, I've got the three lines of evidence, same lines of evidence that I had for the late date, except now I'm going to marshal them in advance of the early date. So I've got archaeological evidence, evidence from non-biblical historical documents, biblical evidence. This time, I'm going to present the data, but I'm going to also react to the late date archaeological evidence, late date evidence, because the way I've structured my outline, you always end with a view that you're going to support. So in this case, I'm supporting the early date. And so I can begin, as I'm presenting this material, critiquing the late date. I can show why this evidence is more in favor of the early date than this evidence, and so on. Biblical evidence is better for the early date than it is for the late date, because I've given the late date a chance to have its say. Now I'm going to have my say and try to present something that will show that this point of view is stronger. And then I'll make a conclusion. It's a very simple kind of outline. You've got two viewpoints, present one, present the other, and that's it. But sometimes things are a little complicated. By the time I get to part two there, the early date, I may have forgotten what the archaeological evidence even was for the late date, because I've had other things intervening. It's too complex. I can't keep it all in my head. If that's the case, there is another way that you can structure an outline that can work better for more complicated stuff. And this is what I call a cross-sectional outline. I break down each viewpoint into its component parts. So instead of making point one, the late date, I make point one archaeological evidence, and then I look at view A and view B. Then I look at evidence from non-biblical historical documents, look at view A, view B, and then biblical evidence, view A and view B. So I pull the lines of evidence together and debate them. The outline looks like this down here. So I've got an introduction, archaeological evidence, the late date, the early date. Evidence from non-biblical historical documents, late date, early date. Biblical evidence, late date, early date. This gives the reader a chance to compare a whole line of evidence and see what each side is saying about it. And of course, I can do my critique with the early date, my critique of the late date right here, and I can do another critique here, another critique here, and then make a conclusion. And so what you have is really two ways of approaching opposing views or differing views. One is to present all of it in a longitudinal fashion. So everything about one view, everything about the other view. But if it's getting complicated, pull out the lines of evidence and make them the main headings so that you gather together all the discussion of archaeology, all the discussion of non-biblical historical documents, all the discussion of biblical evidence, and then you make a conclusion. And so it's your choice. One or the other of these will work really well, depending on how complicated the material is. And if you see it at all that the reader's going to get kind of lost here, then go for a cross-sectional, because it'll definitely help you to marshal things together and make them work in a way that the reader can keep everything, all the ducks in a row, and understand all the various parts of what you're doing. Any questions about that, about outlining? It's not an easy thing, outlining, and you've got to kind of follow a logical process, whatever that process is. And as much as possible, present information and in the beginning, do analysis towards the end, so that you're not, there's a process that some students follow, which I call prejudicing the reader, which is that you tell the reader from the very beginning what you believe. You tell the reader from the very beginning what's wrong with all the opposing views, and then you present some more material. By that time, your reader is prejudiced. The reader might be prejudiced to follow you, or the reader might actually be antagonistic to you, not liking your approach or your tone, and decide that they're going to accept the opposing view because they really don't like the way you're doing things. And so try as much as possible to present evidence, enlighten the reader before you convince the reader of anything. So any questions that anybody has at this point? Okay, now I'm going to move on to something that is a little more subjective, and you may have totally different ways of doing things, but I generally present this to students as an option that they can follow if they want to, and at least you've got something. What do you do with all the books and articles that you've got? You've got to somehow distill out the major information. And some people, if they've got articles printed with from a PDF, they'll mark them up, do all kinds of underlining and make little annotations. And that can work to some extent. If you've got a library book, of course, you can't do that, or you'll end up paying for the book ultimately. You can't mark it up. And distilling things out can be a little more difficult. I suggest the process of note-taking, where you actually look at the main information that you're dealing with, and you take a few notes, maybe some quotations, maybe summarizing material from a source, trying as much as possible to distill out the stuff that you need, and keeping that as a separate note file. If you do that, and I really recommend that you do that, there are ways that you can organize notes for research purposes. And I'm going to follow two possible patterns here. One is in which you're primarily paper-based. So you've typed out your notes or whatever. You've printed notes onto paper because you like working with paper. So you've got a lot of paper stuff. And so that's one way. The other is to go all digital. I don't suggest you have a mix of digital notes and printed notes, because you'll just end up confusing yourself and frustrating yourself and saying mean things to yourself. And it just doesn't work very well. For the past, I think about 15 years, I've gone all digital. And in that time, I published books and extensive journal articles. If I have anything that's in print, I scan it and I put it into digital form, so that everything is digital. I keep the PDFs and the digital scans and all of that. There are neat scanning tools that you can use your phone with. If you're scanning pages from a book, you can do that quite easily. There's a tool called CAM Scanner, C-A-M Scanner, one word, and it's a free download to your phone. And with that, you can take snapshots of several pages and turn them into a PDF and send them to your computer or whatever you want to do. But so this is a very basic method for organizing notes, following two procedures, paper or electronic. And so I recommend preparing notes for each source in turn. So you read Smith, you write some notes. Then you read Jones, you write some notes on it. And be sure to add full bibliographic information. I'll show you that in a minute here. So here's an example. These are some real notes that I took. And mine was electronic. This is from an article called Enactments of Expertise from Annual Review of Anthropology in 2010. And I in some of it, I just sort of summarized what was there. In some cases, not on this part, but I included quotations, so there were some quotations. Whenever I have material, I put a page number where I got it from. So if I ever have to go back to this article, I can instantly find the stuff that I'm referring to. And I made a little note to myself here, these studies, and I put cited/BB, which tells me I also have included those studies in my bibliography. And so I don't have to go looking for them because I already have them, and so on. And so I take these notes, and some of these are direct quotations. Some of them are direct copy and paste from the source and all of that kind of stuff. And so here it is, some notes. Second thing, put your notes into a single digital file if you're using electronic, so a single Word document kind of thing, or a paper document. If you're using paper notes, you have to number all your pages of notes. So if you've got like 15 pages of notes, number them all. And here's an example of that. This is page 32 of some notes. And you notice how I got to the end of one source and I started another source here. And these are actual real notes that I made. They weren't in print, but I just added the page number of 32 to show you how to do that. The next step is to use your outline as an index to your notes. In other words, you're going to cross-index your outline to your notes. And this, once again, is a real outline for a real article that I published. It was actually a book chapter that I published. And so here's my outline. And this is fairly detailed outline because it was quite a long article. And so what I do is I take my outline, and first of all, I create a little symbol for each heading in my outline, and generally put it in red or whatever. So it's generally sort of a non-standard symbol that I would use for whatever. And so I create these little symbols, and I put them for each heading of my outline. They're going to be important, these symbols. And then if I'm using paper form, I will go through my paper notes, and every time I find something relevant to a particular heading, I'll put the page number of the notes there. And so where we were, 27, 41, 44 to 45, these are the page numbers of my notes. So those are, actual notes. And so I've got that. And then I will, in my notes, you notice this is page 35 here, which was in my head, under my outline. Page 35, I had some stuff on the new consciousness. And so I put the symbol, which was a plus sign, right at the beginning, and I stuck that in my notes so that I can find this instantly as I thumb through my notes. Oh, page 35, my notes, I've got some good stuff on that. So I go there, and there's a plus sign saying this part is the good part, and that's what it is. What this means is you're going through your notes once and cross-referencing them to your outline by putting page numbers, if you're dealing with print, under the headings of the outline, and a symbol related to that heading into the notes. So that creates a true cross-reference. Now, if you're using electronic form, you don't need the page numbers. All you need is the symbols. And so create a symbol for each heading, and then insert the symbol wherever you want in your notes. As you read through your notes, you say, oh, this section, that's the plus sign one, that's that heading. And how are you going to find these later? Well, you can use the find function. It's currently called navigation, I think, to find the plus sign. Generally put a space between the plus sign and the first part of the text that you're including in that particular heading. That's information related to the heading that had the plus sign. And then you can just use navigation to find all the plus signs in your notes. And so as you read through your notes and you insert these elements electronically into your Word document, you can find those elements again just by simply using the find tool, the navigation tool. And it'll dart down to all of these, which is why you should use kind of non-standard kinds of symbols, so you're not messing up your search. And you can search for and you can find anything that you want. And so this is the difference. With paper notes, you're going to have to put the page numbers of the notes in. With electronic notes, all you need is a symbol. Insert the symbol in the right place within your notes, and then you can find it once again. The new consciousness material is wherever there's a plus sign in your notes, and just use the find function and navigate to it. So, any questions on that? It's a fairly simple method. There's more information on this in the Research Strategies textbook, but I like to suggest to students at least one method that they can use. And if they say, a plague on that method, I don't want it, that's fine. Find one of your own, but be sure you have some kind of standard method that really enables you to make use of the material in your that you've gathered for your research. You don't want to just gather stuff in order to have an impressive bibliography, but never actually use it in your writing. And I'm going to show you in a minute how this all gets incorporated into your writing. So any questions up to this point on what we've done? We've looked at a preliminary outline. We've looked at a method for creating and organizing notes so that you can distill out the important information. Okay, now here's where I get really opinionated. I'm going to try to, whoops. Let's just close this down for a second. Just going to reload this to get it back to the beginning. There we go. I was looking at it earlier and forgot to rewind. Okay. Persuasion and effective communication in academic writing. This is a Google Slides presentation. And so we're going to go with it. Now, something that you might believe is writing begins with a topic, but it might be better to start with reading. Before you actually do much academic writing, find some representative books, theses, or articles, and study the process. Really try to get into academic writing by determining how the writers do it. How do they present, for example, their research problem? How do they present evidence? How do they argue back and forth with other scholars? How do they present their material? Do they use a lot of quotations or not? How do they structure the whole thing? How do they make conclusions? It's really helpful if you spend a little time, if you have a little time, reading representative material in the discipline you're working with to see how published scholars actually do their work. What makes this successful? How did this thing get published? What was the process that was followed that made this worthy of being published? We often read for content, but we should also read for process. How does the author introduce the topic? How does the author clarify a thesis or a purpose? How does the author organize various points of view, present evidence, express arguments for or against? Does the author leave anything out or misrepresent anything? That's an aha moment when you suddenly realize that the author is not giving you everything that you should be given, or the author is really not presenting stuff honestly. That happens sometimes. And how does the author make conclusions? Reading for process can really help to improve your own skills, because you want as much as possible to follow the patterns in the discipline that published scholars use. It gives it a much more professional sense. Now, planning and structure. Some of this we've already done. Generate a guiding research question or a thesis statement, create a preliminary outline, develop a proposal, just kind of a summary of what you want to do. I've got a suggestion as well. Work on a précis document. Let's have a look at this one. Based on your thesis statement or your question and your outline, flesh your outline out by adding a summary of what you would cover under each heading, thus creating an abstract or a summary of where you want to go in your project. For an average research project, this might be no more than a page, but you flesh out your outline by saying, in this section, I want to discuss so-and-so, and I want to address this, and I want to look at these various points of view. And so that in one page, you generate something like a summary of what you're going to do and where you're going to go. And the reason for this is that the great killer of academic writing initiative is anxiety, which leads to exhaustion. It also leads to procrastination. the blank screen is a deadly thing for a lot of people. Okay, I'm going to start writing my paper today, and you look at the blank screen and you close your laptop and you go and do something else because tomorrow is going to be a better day, and I'm just too anxious right now. Summarizing your entire paper in one page might seem like a lot of extra work, but it can save you a lot of time later on by simply killing procrastination. You actually know, now I'm going to write my introduction. Oh, this is what I'm going to include in my introduction. Let me see if I can get going on this. Point one, oh, I know what I'm going to do here, so let's get going on it. And just that little advanced preparation can really, really help you. If you're doing something like a dissertation, you might want to write a longer summary. I did one for a master's thesis. It was 25 pages long, and actually fleshed out what I wanted to do in the entire thesis. And I built on it as I went along so that I would have this summary in front of me and keep me on track. It really worked well. Now, in your writing, let the sources do the heavy lifting. You don't have to write a research project just out of your own ideas. And we all have limited ideas. Let your sources do some of that heavy work. They're not just there to provide nifty quotations. They can be used to carefully lay out the context, background, main ideas related to the research problem you're dealing with. Now, I'm not proposing here that you copy out your sources, but the material that your sources present can be very valuable information that you can use so that it doesn't all have to come out of your own head. And, it's frightening to have everything have to come out of your own head, because how are you going to do that? This is the principle of research as a conversation. Research writing is a conversation. You're interacting with your sources, agreeing with some, debating with others, ultimately coming up with a view that you can call your own. Research is a conversation. And so think of yourself in your writing as conversing with other scholars. Here's some examples. This is actual stuff that I've written and published. And the first part, Harry M. Collins and Robert Evans have described the evolution of thinking about expertise in the sciences as comprising three waves, and then explain what the three waves were. I'm not quoting them directly at this point. Wave one of the 1950s and 60s saw scholars being accepted as authoritative simply by virtue of their education and expertise. And then I thought I'd throw in a quotation because it was relevant. And so I throw in a quotation. The second one here, James Goldman's dissertation on collective intelligence found that while crowdsourced knowledge creation holds promise, it is yet to overcome the challenge that experienced users of the World Wide Web do not attribute the same credibility to creations of the collective as they do to the sources they view as having cognitive authority. I'm explaining and summarizing what Goldman is saying. I'm not in any way copying him. I'm not in any way quoting from him, except for the term cognitive authority, which he used directly. But I'm letting my sources present a lot of the background information that I'm going to be dealing with. And I do it by summarizing what they had to say. So your review of what others have done is not to be merely dull history. You're trying to do these sorts of things. Explain the main schools of thought on the issue, lay out views you're planning to critique, demonstrate where the gaps and inconsistencies and errors are found, and provide a rationale why you believe your contribution will move things forward. Now, literature review is the part of your paper where you're looking at the various points of view or the history of the study of this field. And so you have to find the main players, main schools of thought. Try to recount the development of the thought, showing agreements and disagreements over time. You can kind of summarize that. In the early days, they believed this, and now they've come to believe that, and so has said this. And as you conclude, make clear what you see as a gap in knowledge, something that will justify that you're writing this project. So here is where you're going to say, something more needs to be said about this, or these viewpoints all have a consistent problem of whatever. You want to determine who agrees with who and who disagrees with who. And those might not be absolute. They may only partially disagree with one another or whatever. There'll be nuances. You can chart this. So as you're starting to read various scholars, you start to see that some of them belong in various camps or schools. School 1, Smith, Johnson, Eveready argues. School 2, Johnson, Jackson, Drummond, and Smithers argue. So try to group together various schools of thought, various approaches. If you're doing the date of the Exodus, you'd have to get the late daters all in one group and the early daters all in one group. And then you'd find there's one crazy middle dater who has really tried to find a middle ground between the two. I'm not sure whether that worked, but so there it is. And, chart it out, put it on a piece of paper and, sort of draw little diagrams if you feel like you want to, so that you have all of your scholars in a row organized. And when you start to look at arguments, C.E.B. Cranfield's commentary on the book of Romans is a really helpful thing. This is his discussion of Romans 7 to 13. And what he does is he lays out the major points of view on a particular issue. And so he just lays them all out. Here they are, 6 or 7. I think there were up to 9 that he laid out. And then he started winnowing through them, saying, these ones really don't work. And ultimately, the choice should be between number 3 and number 6, or maybe a modification of number 6. And he explains why he moves more to the direction of one than the other, and why he's rejecting some points of view and accepting others. And what this does is to give you a consistent idea that he's using evidence and argument in such a way to help you make sense of why certain things are more likely to be true than other things. And I really like his stuff. You won't be using point form like he does, but this kind of even-handed discussion, methodical discussion of ideas, showing why certain ideas don't work and why other ideas do work. And evidence. Keep it structured. Keep your arguments structured, and your outline will help you to do that. To say, I'm in this section, I'm dealing with this particular issue, and I'm going to structure it carefully. I really believe in structure in research projects. Stream of consciousness writing, where you just kind of let it all hang out and then determine your outline later, just doesn't work. It doesn't succeed. Now, you need to be even-handed and fair to all points of view. This means you never disagree with an author before you've explained clearly that author's point of view. You don't say Smith is a buffoon, just look at what he had to say. No. What you do is you say, this is what Smith had to say, and here's some reasons why this needs to be challenged. And then provide some evidence so that you're even-handed and fair. And don't reveal your conclusions so soon. Even if you have a thesis statement, let your sources speak and let your readers study them as much as possible objectively before you make a conclusion. You want your conclusions and your arguments to go in the latter half or latter 2/3 of your paper so that the reader can follow along with you and maybe come to the same conclusions on their own. Okay, find a voice. Now, this is a little tricky. I've got a certain voice in my writing, which is, I call it direct, methodical, and not afraid to criticize, but I do it with diplomacy if I can. But I am quite direct, quite goal-oriented. So here's an example of my writing. This is from an article I published in 2010. To be even more brutally honest, many of these students have an uncanny ability to optimize highly inefficient research methods and somehow pull together a decent dissertation by sheer brilliance alone, despite shabby skills. So you notice I'm being critical, but not too cruel. These students then take up professorial roles, never having learned how to navigate a journal database with skill, use controlled vocabularies to advantage, or even take on advanced features in the library catalog. Essentially, what I'm saying is some very bright students without any skills somehow managed to pull together a decent PhD dissertation, then went into professorial roles and didn't have a clue how to teach anybody else how to do research, and they really don't know how to optimize databases. And that's the mean approach. But you notice how I tried to do it with diplomacy, and yet it was very direct. Find your own voice. Take a look at your writing and figure out what your voice is. Are you pleasant and kind? Are you direct and brutal? Are you idiosyncratic with a lot of slang? Just what? But your voice has to be clear. Avoid ambiguity and fuzziness. There are some people, especially theologians and philosophers, who believe that complexity is your friend, and ambiguity is the sort of thing that you want to emphasize at all times. And so, reading Karl Barth, the theologian, he is a tremendous friend of ambiguity. And there are times when I just go, huh? Did you mean this? Did you mean that? I don't know. But it gives you the sense that you're deep, You're ambiguous or fuzzy means you're deep. I would rather be clear. And I try as much as possible in my writing to be clear. Also be strongly goal-oriented. You've got a purpose in mind. Don't wander off from your goal, but aim for it. So if you've got a research problem, address the research problem, look at the options, and then, move directly to whatever you want to do with this thing, and really make it very goal-oriented. And I've seen some writing that tends to meander, doesn't seem to have much of a purpose, and your professor's mind wanders off too when there's not a strong goal. Avoid being idiosyncratic, slang and cute turns of phrase. It might reflect your personality, but being quirky doesn't always work. Although I did get away with it once. I submitted an article for peer review that was entitled "Can't Get No Respect." That was actually the title of it. And I assumed that the editor would simply change the title to, something much more scholarly. But she was amused by it. She decided to publish it, and it is still called "Can't Get No Respect." And so sometimes you can get away with it, but not very often. So just be careful with that. And be consistent. Your voice is your way, your pattern of writing. And if you have a consistent voice, it makes it easier to write. You might need to vary the difficulty of your language depending on your audience. If you're writing for a more basic kind of audience, you might not use as much academic language. But your tone, the way you write should be fairly consistent all the way through. Minimize use of the passive voice. This position was advocated by Smith. Make it Smith advocated this position. Passives tend to limit power. They tend to weaken your arguments. So avoid them as much as you can. And to develop your voice, I suggest things like blogging or journaling or something like that, where you can, write persuasive material just on your own, and learn how to write interestingly, but with conviction, with a strong goal orientation. And at the same time, you can learn when to ease up, discuss other people's views, when to bear down, convincing readers, to kind of get your voice to sing. And I really suggest, if you're having any trouble with writing, that you start doing a lot of free writing. You've got an idea or you're bugged by something you saw on the news, and just write something up, even if it's only for yourself, so that you can develop your voice, you can develop your skill in presenting material in such a way that is both convincing and interesting. Here's one. Avoid writing yourself into a corner. You're writing your paper and you come to a part where you just don't know how to go on. I'm stuck. I don't know what I should say next. I don't know where it's going. When that happens, bear down, don't stop writing, but write through that problem. Just put something down and get yourself to a place where you're feeling like, I know what I'm going to do next, and then stop. The reason for that is that you want to leave yourself in a good place for the next time that you write. You want to leave yourself in a spot where you can say, oh, I know what to do. Yesterday I wrote this far and now I know where to go. if you write yourself into a corner, the writer of today will curse the writer of yesterday who left you with a big problem to solve just when you need to get some writing done. And you're left with this big problem, first thing in the day, and you need to do some writing, and now you got to address this problem. Better to bear down and address it before you stop the day before, and then leave yourself some room to be in an easier place at the beginning. Now, your words have more power when you primarily explain the views of others rather than doing a lot of quoting from them. Thus, you say, Brown has argued that, Smith countered this view by pointing out that. Overall, there's a growing consensus that, and you're adding footnotes or endnotes, so you're noting the scholars, but you're really summarizing their views. If you have a lot of quotations, it seems to have the reader kind of getting lost in a sea of words. Different styles pop up, and you have to understand, something can be quoted out of context, and you have to figure out what's the context here. Much better to do a lot of explaining on your own. Selwyn pointed out that the emphasis on making students technologically literate, etc., studied by Grant, Malloy, and Murphy demonstrated that, and so on. And so you're referring to, you're summarizing, you're not doing a lot of quotation. Now, some writing still allows footnotes, and they're a great place to put value-added material. So if you're using footnotes, and this is from my article, Was Jesus a Disciple of John? I can add additional little notes that could be helpful. And so I even explain further things that didn't actually fit into the text of it in the footnotes. And so you can use notes for all kinds of nifty little things. Now, make use of grammar tools that are available to you. Grammarly is probably the most common one, but there are also a lot of common grammar error tools. And if you have any struggles with grammar, try to fix them, work on grammatical stuff. And there are a lot of online tools available to you. And I want to let you know a few of these. EndNote is a way of gathering citations together. And we've got it linked from our library homepage, but you can actually get into EndNote on your own through that link and set up your own personal account. There's a site in Britain, comes out of the University of Cambridge. Some graduate students created it there, called Kika, that helps to manage citations and collect your PDFs. So you might want that. Academic Phrase Bank is a really cool tool. It gives you the right turn of phrase to use for various things, like I have to make a transition. I'm going to be moving on from this to that. And it'll give you several ways of verbalizing that, turning to the issue of so-and-so, or now that we have discussed this, we turn to so-and-so, or, moving on to this or that. And they have all these kind of turns of phrase. If you ever have trouble, how do I say this academically? Academic Phrase Bank is great. It's got all kinds of tools. And there's a bunch of other apps. And we've got a link in our own library homepage to a number of apps that you can download for various kinds of support in academic writing. So I'm going to conclude at that point. For those of you doing the exercises, I'm asking you to do the reading and then some evaluation just based on what we discussed today and this platform. So just answer some questions, and the template is down here. And so there it is. I'm going to stop my share at this point, get back into the groove here. Now, any questions? We're moving into our last 7 minutes or so, and just wondered if they have any questions. Just be sure to unmute yourself, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. James.
When I was doing some of the research from after our last class, and I was narrowing down the focus of my research, I clicked peer review, but I realized I'm also asking for just books, not scholarly journals. And I didn't realize, are books really peer reviewed, or?
Books are editorially reviewed. There's generally not a bunch of peers, but the advantage with books is that editors for books are scholars in their own right. And so they act as a peer reviewer of one. But most books are reviewed quite carefully. I published the book chapter I referred to in my discussion earlier was published in a book that was actually had two editors, and the two of them actually did a fairly rigorous peer review. I had been invited to write this chapter, and then I discovered that they weren't just going to let it go. They wanted me to really work it. And so I got a whole bunch of comments back and did some revisions and stuff. So it varies a bit, but generally academic books have high-level people at the top of, doing the editorial work. And I've got to know some of them the hard way through publishing books with them. And peer review can be a cruel and brutal process sometimes. There are some peer reviewers who don't use anything like tact or kindness. They're just brutal. And so you have to have a thick skin when you get peer reviewed. Just be prepared. Any other questions? You don't just want me to ramble on forever. Well, let me just say that I think for a lot of students, the idea that I could actually improve my research skills seems to be something that is sort of, incremental and far away. I improve my research skills by doing research. The more I do research, the better I'll get at this. But there's some very intentional things that you can do along the way that aren't incremental, that are just actually, I will determine that I am going to write a research question and do a preliminary outline before I get into this. I'm going to use advanced tools in my research. And so I have spent the last 35, 36 years teaching mainly graduate students, some undergraduate students, research skills in credit courses where they had to submit assignments, and I've seen their improvement. And so I know this can be taught, this can be learned, and you can do some real ramping up from wherever you are to a much better place by just sort of intentionally learning advanced skills and using them effectively. And so I encourage you to do that. Don't just sort of let it slide and say, well, my skills aren't all that great, but I guess they'll get better eventually. They can get better now. And I've seen it. I've had thousands of students. And, my success rate in having students pass my credit courses is up around the 97, 98% level. And it's because I drag them along with me. And if some are lagging behind, I encourage them and cajole them and work with them. And they make it. And the end product is far superior to the beginning product. And so I know it can be done. And that kind of a track record of 35, 36 years of doing this with thousands of students, I think gives me a little bit of credibility in saying, I know this works. I know this is successful. And I also use the same kinds of techniques in my own writing. And so there it is. And it does get published. So any other questions? Time for one more comment, question, anything you've got? Okay, I will turn it over to our glorious leader.
Well, you've been a glorious leader yourself, Professor Batke. Thank you so very much for sharing your wisdom and your time with us these past 4 sessions. So this is extremely helpful. The videos will be shared out with our student community, especially those who are in the process of doing research projects. And the 6 sessions you provided to the faculty will strengthen their ability to work with students engaged in the kinds of research projects that they're assigning. So you've been a real gift, and thank you for it.
That's wonderful.
So, with this, I could ask somebody to close us in prayer. Would anybody like to? Anybody? Jason, go ahead.
Sure. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we just bless and thank you for how you came to earth and died for us, gave us the gift of salvation. I thank you, Lord, for Professor Bill and sharing his knowledge with us in order to further research and further your kingdom. I pray a blessing on everyone's own research and their academic work. Just give you thanks for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
All right. Thank you, everybody. God bless and have a great fall term.
The mission of Holy Apostles College and Seminary is to form faithful witnesses of Christ. Year after year, the prestigious Newman Guide has recommended Holy Apostles for our academic excellence and steadfast fidelity to the magisterial teachings of the Catholic Church. We are also fully accredited and the leader in Catholic online learning. Our students enjoy the unsurpassed flexibility to study on their own time and anywhere in the world through asynchronous engagement. Holy Apostles is dedicated to the relentless pursuit of truth, which allows students in all academic programs, including undergraduate, graduate, and personal interest, to formulate a coherent worldview based on both faith and reason. The study of the liberal arts also develops and refines key competencies associated with career readiness, such as critical thinking and problem solving, clear communication, collaboration, and a strong work ethic. The tuition rate at Holy Apostles is one of the most affordable in the country. Yearly tuition for a full-time undergraduate is under $12,000. Students at Holy Apostles can graduate with minimal or even no college debt, which enables them to live out their calling as faithful witnesses of Christ without heavy financial burdens holding them back. Please visit www.holyapostles.edu/admissions for more information. The Fall 2021 admissions deadline is Friday, July 23rd. Classes start Monday, August 30th. See you soon.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.